It strikes me as interesting, this whole concept of training as you play, that intensity. And we all know Paul Ince was intense on the field. Any football fan who watched him during his period would attest to that. But who else was really as equally as intense as you were, Ince, in training at least?
I mean, I can just look at the Manchester United team that I played in 89, 90, 91, got on to 95. You know, people like Brian Robson, you know, Steve Bruce, Eric Cantona, Roy Keane. You know, we had this desire, you know, to just train as we played. So we went at hell for leather. You know, there was no holding back. I accept that we wasn't in a situation, as Gary said, where we were locked down for three months. You know, but sometimes when you look at the Liverpool team, and they have won the title, and you can get complacent. And if half the players are complacent, maybe subconsciously, you know, they're complacent. Oh, we can just go through the motions. I'm not going to train as hard today. You know, then you can get these injuries. You know, and I think when you're trying to talk about the fast twitches, we're normally talking about centre forwards, people who are quick. You know, and I just think with Milner, when it was fatigue, he's getting on a bit. To be honest, Gary, you know what I mean? I don't think Matic was that serious. Granit Xhaka. That might be a blessing in disguise for Arsenal, if you ask my honest opinion. And the lad Mari, watching them play the other day against Manchester City. But it is a strange one, you know, because I just feel that if you feel you're going into a game, you've got to have that mentality that you're in a game. And don't forget, these teams have played 2 games before the season started, this lockdown started, before the season started. So they've had a couple of games. Obviously, Robertson got injured in the last game. Salah obviously can't be fit, Gary, as we said, because he didn't come on and play any part. I think he'll be playing on Wednesday or Tuesday when they play Palace. But Gary's right. Liverpool can afford to have, you know, 2 or 3, 4 injuries because the title's already won for me.
Well, you mentioned straight away Manchester United and the competitive element there. Was that the club with the most intense trainers then? Because obviously, in the landscape of the Premier League, it's Manchester United have dominated for the best part of, say, 20, 25 years. But was it only at Manchester United where you saw that amount of people, that amount of players training intensively? Or was it at every club?
No, not every club. Listen, I've been to clubs. I've been to Liverpool, you know, when I went to Liverpool, and, you know, there was certain players who would just go through the motions. And it would affect their performance on a Saturday. You know, and that used to wind me up, you know, but obviously, playing for England, you know, when you've got the top players there, the Shearers and the Gascoignes and, you know, people who play at top clubs, they've got this self-motivation. They've got that self-pride, you know, self-desire to perform week in and week out in training. And some players just think it's about the Saturday afternoon at 3 o'clock. The best players do it every day in training. And that's something that Fergie installed into us, Terry Venables, Glenn Hoddle, as managers. You know, and players do it themselves. Self-motivation is the key for me, to go out every day, and you have to prove yourself when you're playing against the best players, and you've got younger players coming through, like I had with Paul Scholes and Beckham and Steven Gerrard when I was at Liverpool, nipping at your heels. You've got to do it week in and week out, and, you know, that spurs you on to be better players.
Did you try to push them yourselves as well, particularly as a more senior member of the team?
No. Absolutely no chance, because if I did that, they would take my place in a couple of months. So I don't want to push on too much, you know. But no, we installed it. That was the thing about Manchester United. You know, when I went there as a young player, Brian Robson, you know, took me under his wing and told me, this is how we train, this is what you need to be doing week in and week out to get into the first team. And we all took that on board. A young Roy Keane coming from Nottingham Forest, told him I said exactly the same thing. And that's what you try to do. You tell young players, especially talented young players, you know, if you want to be one of the greats, you know, people like Steven Gerrard, Paul Scholes, it's not just about the Saturday afternoon. It's what you do during the training sessions, how you conduct yourself, how you live your life.
Yeah, and there's all those stories, right, about Beckham practicing his free kicks, etc. as well, non-stop. Is that true?
Unbelievable. We used to finish England training about 1:30, and we used to do like a cool down for about 30 minutes. And David Beckham used to just get 10 balls, and he used to hit some from the right, some from the left, some from the centre. He used to spend about 30, 45 minutes, and we just used to just watch him in awe, you know, really watch him in awe. And when you kind of think about magic moments, and you think about the England game at Old Trafford against Greece to qualify for the European Championships, you fancy David Beckham all along. And that's what it's about. It's about practicing all the time, trying to make yourself better, and that makes you a better player and hopefully a better team.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think the truth is that you can't just turn the switch on a Saturday afternoon or a Wednesday evening as the game starts. And for me, the best players, the greatest players, are also invariably the best trainers and the most professional people. There are the odd exception, I would suggest, and it depends maybe. And in actual fact, you probably can't get away with it so much in the modern game. But, I look back to my time and I don't think, actually, Paul would have crossed or been in the England setup with Gary Lineker. But I was with Gary Lineker at Spurs and with England as well. And there were certainly times when if he didn't feel right, then he would happily step out of training or step away from training. But there were certainly periods every week where he trained as if it were a game scenario. So that's the closest I can come up with of a great player, a great goal scorer who maybe took some liberties a little bit with training. I don't know whether Paul would maybe agree with that.
Listen, well, I didn't take any liberties, but I can understand when you're one of the biggest names that if you don't fancy it, you might just pull out, or not train or take time off. But, going back to when you spoke about today's modern game football, I think you're more likely to get away with doing what you want in training.
Really?
So I'll tell you why, because we have a lack of leaders.
Okay.
We have a lack of leaders. And I think, I couldn't go to Manchester United and think I could just go into training and get away with it, because I wouldn't, because Brian Robson would be on my coattails, so would Peter Schmeichel, all the leaders, Mark Hughes. Yeah. You wouldn't get away with it now, in our time. And I think when you look at Jordan Henderson at Liverpool, he seems that type. He wouldn't allow players to come into training and think they can go into training 50%. A lot of players now just kind of think about themselves. Think about as long as I'm doing okay, it's becoming more individual. I don't see that at Liverpool. I think that's why they've been so great this year.
Just going back again to Gary, you mentioned Gary Lineker, okay, but you've also mentioned quite frequently on the show the best players that you stepped on the pitch with would have to include Ozzy Ardiles and Glenn Hoddle. What about their training methods? How hard a training were they?
Well, I would say they were both thoroughly professional in their approach and attitude to it, and they were great players who trained very well. Paul Gascoigne and Paul Ince mentioned Gazza a little while ago as well. Gazza was a genius, but he trained 100%, was totally committed. You look back to that cup final where Gazza got injured against Nottingham Forest. It was a crazy challenge, but you would see Gazza in training at times careering into people where maybe he's lost his cool a little bit, he's a bit wound up, whatever it might be. But he was always totally committed. I go back to the point I made, and I don't think we need to labour this too much. The best players, the best sports people, the biggest achievers have to be the best trainers. Michael Jordan, I don't know if you've seen that documentary on him on Netflix, unbelievable, how focused he was 100% of the time.
Okay.
And the thing is, when you mention that, Gary, and that's what I'm saying to you, I mentioned Michael Jordan in The Last Dance, and it's funny when you talk about training, how he wouldn't let people like Pippen, Kerr, coming in. The expectations that he expects from those players. So that was the same for me going to Manchester United. The expectations that Brian Robson had, he expected from me, and that's exactly how it was.
Out of interest, because you're saying the best players were the best trainers, and undoubtedly they've given us so many memories on the pitch. What about the players that weren't headline grabbers? What about the players who perhaps weren't as technically gifted as some of the other players on the pitch? That's one argument about Ronaldo and Messi, isn't it? That Ronaldo is an amazing player, yes, but he trains so hard. Messi is just more naturally gifted. Did you see other players in the less high-profile players training even harder to impress, say, your Gary Nevilles and the like, who by his own admission, I think he said he wasn't as good as some of the others around him?
No, but I think, for me, when people kind of asked me to name my probably top 11 players that I've played with, you know, I always find it kind of guess between Gary Neville or Xavi Zanetti at Inter Milan, because it's not all about talent. You know, Jordan Henderson is not the most talented player in the world, but what he's got, he gives it 110%. Gary Neville was the same. Mike Phelan was the same at Manchester United. There's always certain players. You know, I'm not a talented player as far as flair or anything like that, but what I have, you give 110%. And, you know, if you do that, you know, you got to make the most of what you've got. And Gary Neville was one of those people. So was Mike Phelan, you know, Neil Webb to a certain extent. And, you know, there's loads of those players, but it's not all about trying to beat 3 or 4 people and put the ball in the net. We've all got a piece to the jigsaw puzzle, and one doesn't function without the other. So whether you're just you know, a tackler or a carrier, or, you know, you break it up, and a David Batty, for example, Gary, you'll know David Batty, wasn't blessed, you know, but what he gave to the team was more important than anybody else at times.
Yeah, you need players that bring balance to a side. You need that mix and that spread. You know, we can't all be good at the same things. And, you know, if you picked a team with 10 Lionel Messis in it, I don't think you're going to be successful, as brilliant as he is as an individual, because you need that blend and you need that mix. And, you know, I've just heard Paul say that he wasn't, you know, a particularly talented player. I think he's doing himself a disservice there completely, because Paul could play. There's no two ways about that. But he supplemented that with great attitude, hard work and application. I didn't have the career that Paul had, but the career I did have, which took me briefly to the very top, World Cups with England and FA Cup finals and UEFA Cup finals with Spurs and what have you. You know, I was alongside a lot of highly talented players, but my quality that I brought was the work ethic, the attitude, the professionalism, the stuff that maybe the pundits and the punters don't see so much, but is also equally as important as the talent of the Gascoignes and the Hoddles and the Ardileses.
Very briefly, we're going to go back to the match. We have someone standing by for a post-match interview. Did you play against Paul I think it would have been more when he was at West Ham, early days, mid-80s?
Listen, yeah. I'm almost old enough to be Paul's father.
What year were you at West Ham, Paul?
85, 86, yeah, 87, 88.
Gary was at Spurs.
You must have played against each other.
Yeah, sure. Do you know, I'm going to have to look it up. And I normally do my research, and that's one thing I didn't check, to be honest with you. I can't remember whether I got man of the match when I played against Paul or not.
I think you might have been on the bench when you played against me, to be fair. I'm going to have to look that up, Gary.
You weren't experienced enough to make an impact on Gary Stevens, Paul, but you certainly made one throughout the length of your career. There's absolutely no doubt about that.